Okay, welcome ladies this week. It's so nice to be with everybody again. Today we are going to be talking about the second discipline, and disciplines meaning it's a way of building these long-term philosophies that guide us onto a path of life and to keep us resonating in a way that is, in our coaching world, we call more anabolic, higher way of being. So last week we talked about awareness, and this week we're going to talk about acceptance. So anyone want to give some thoughts as a recap of awareness last week and how that worked? Basically how awareness came about.
I'm feeling more comfortable just diving into acceptance.
Okay.
But if anybody else wants to tap into awareness, I'm open.
We could transition quickly by saying that awareness is the ability to start to see, right? Becoming more aware. And now we're going to move into what you can accept, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So first we have awareness. So now we're able to see, and then moving into acceptance. That is something that helps us to understand and embrace what is. So just what is happening, and not telling a story around it of what's good or bad, but basically just what is, and accepting and being accepting of that place. So Nancy, you have thoughts on that?
I was just looking at a quote. Enduring means accepting things as they are and not as you would wish them to be, and then looking ahead, not behind. And it's by Rafael Nadal. And I think that's, what it is. It's really about accepting where we are in the present moment. So right now we are in a pandemic. Many of us are in lockdown, right? We might have to wear masks going to the store. It's accepting the present, being present in the moment. It's not acquiescing. It's not, tolerating. It's actually accepting where we are in the moment.
Yeah, well, and taking off of that, you talked about with athletes, right? So Rolf has given you this quote, and acceptance in a performance mode, whether we're performing as an athlete or whether we're performing as a person, any type of performance, there's a lot of acceptance that has to go on in order for us to even move forward or maintain where we want to go or what we want to do, right? Because so many people attach themselves to the outcomes so often. And
I think that's good. And I think too, a lot of people want to control a situation or control the outcome. Might have expectations about what the outcome is, and get upset when those expectations aren't met, and get kind of all spirally, right?
Right, and spiraling down, right? Because you're getting so frustrated, and
yeah, and right now there's like a lot of fear. There's a lot going on in the air right now, and you get to choose whether you want to dive down into fear or if you want to be open to what is possible, like this new normal that we have the ability to step into moving forward. What are we going to take from this experience of being in a pandemic? So Karen.
Well, that's what comes to mind for me is I want to say last Friday, May 1st, there were a lot of people that were demonstrating at the capitals throughout the United States. And one of them here in our capital, Sacramento, is just, 40 minutes away down the road from me. People are angry because you have these small entrepreneurs that are financially going under. And we have the fears coming up, and people are rallying for their financial well-being and whatnot. And it's hard to not look at that. But there has to be looking at our internal energy and what it is that we need to learn about ourselves through this pandemic. And if we allow our fears to come out, then we stay stuck in that. But if we learn to find, because we can't change the circumstances, we can't change what's going on out there, but we can change what's going on inside of ourselves and accept, how can I accept this? And how can I learn from this? And what can I learn about me? And how can I make my life better through this? As to what is the opportunity? Because when I live in fear, if anybody who lives in fear, there is always an opportunity to learn more about yourself, because that's what's going to hold you back. And so these entrepreneurs, some way or another, they're creative, they're imaginative, they have personalities that draw their clients in. They have everything it takes. Now, how can they embrace that potential quality of themselves, accept that, and move into another direction? Because they may not be able to open up their shops ever again. And then what's going to be our new reality? And how can I bring that? How can I accept that into my life today?
I think what comes up for me when I hear acceptance, everything that you guys have said, there's a part of it that's like, we have this conditioned mindset. We have these beliefs that are the way it's always been, the way we want it, the way that we think it's supposed to be. And then we bump up against the way it is not. When there's those challenges within us, because it's not the way that we want it to be, or we think it's supposed to be. And so there's the discernment of what can I control and what can I not control. And so this is that beautiful part of acceptance, where when you can discern where truth and ego are, right? Again, we talked a little bit about truth and ego and discernment with awareness as well, but where acceptance is the ability to say, I want it to be this way, and I understand why I want it to be this way. And a lot of that happens to actually be ego-based. But the truth is that it isn't that way, and I can't do anything about that. And or these are the things that I can do something about. So when you can discern what you can and can't control, you can let go of those that you don't have any control over and take hold of what you can control. And then that's where I think a lot of us would be willing to have more acceptance of the situation if we could discern the difference in what we can and can't control. So I think so much of this uncertainty brings up that fear of not knowing, of what we can't control and what we believe it's supposed to look like, and it's not looking like that, right? But if you shift your mind away from and realize that you can let go of the things that you can't control and focus solely on those that you do have control over, right? For me personally, I had to really shift my mind in the beginning of this whole process of, okay, here I am, I'm not feeling well. No one is around me. My children, my loved ones were all gone. I'm left onto my own devices. I couldn't really get medical help because they weren't willing to let me come in and be seen. And, I wasn't so highly symptomatic at that point in time that I needed to go to the, ER, but trying to figure navigating it all on my own, I adopted a mindset of how can I create my own optimal health? And that's what I can control, right? So that was literally what I focused on, because that's all I knew I could control. And so being able to accept the things that I didn't have control over, accepting the things that I did have control over, allowed me to, just feel a lot less unease of the uncertainty. So.
Yeah. Well, when you talked about that and acceptance and letting go, right? Because the other choice, if we don't let go, is that we fight it.
Right.
And when we fight it, it drains us.
Mm-hmm.
And that one event that starts to drain us can, if we allow it, if we don't accept it, if we allow it to go and to continue to spiral, then it can be a series of drains, and then it totally can sabotage whatever it is that we're wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
So acceptance in any part of our life, like you're saying, it's just a matter of learning how to let go, and that takes practice.
Sure.
It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. And I like how you brought that up too, with the fight or the flight, like the freeze, the fear, because that limits our possibilities when we go down into those fear places, or that fighting.
Mm-hmm.
It limits the opportunities. And also, Karen, I liked how you brought up the entrepreneurs, because a very popular word during this time has been pivot, right? Acceptance that things are not going to go back to how they were, but how are they going to be? And we're in this place of uncertainty, giving us that opportunity for discernment, for steps forward.
Yeah. And finding ways, I think it's about finding ways that you experience and look to see how willing you are on a spectrum of like 1 to 10, how willing are you to accept? And oftentimes we can learn this acceptance. We can learn to accept and let go. But of course, when something comes up it's a really high outcome that we want, then that can put some stress around it. And then that might be harder to let go if there's an even higher outcome. So while we know it and we're like, oh yeah, I can let that go. Other times we're like, oh, I cannot let that go. So it's tricky. It's real tricky. But just to give an example of kind of a way just with acceptance, I mean, if we take an example of someone who's had knee surgery, right? So you have someone, they have knee surgery, they're used to running, okay? So let's just take KB. KB, here you are, you're running, you have an accident. Now you have to have knee surgery. Oh my goodness, what happens? Okay, you have the surgery and you're like, now I've got to go through physical therapy. I'm used to running all these miles. I can't do it. So either you can go to can't or this side, and then or you can accept it and say, okay, the physical therapy, I'm just going to do the treadmill. We have smaller goals, smaller things that we work on to get us back to a place. So sometimes, figuring out what kind of story that you can relate to can help you to identify, as we're meandering through life, when do we need to let go? What are some things that we might need to let go of right now? Especially being home, especially changes in our lifestyle, changes in the things that are going on, right? That's what comes up.
I think there's a tremendous amount of letting go right now across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from, individual mindsets, relationships, where they things that you once thought were important, you realize now are not, right? Think about organizations who once had the mindset that, no, we really would never be able to adopt a work at home kind of flexibility in our scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
And now forced into having to do that, they've also been able to release the need to control that now, right?
So that's what we talked about. Like we talked about awareness last week, to be aware of the fact that, okay, now people are staying at home. And then now what do you do about that, right? Because then that's a feeling and you can go plus or minus. So do we plus it up and let go, or do we minus it down and want to try to control it and fight it? So sometimes that's an easy way or concept way to bring it in to see what we're doing. But
Karen, tell us about your acceptance part of your, your awareness and acceptance and action.
On my course that I'm giving,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a section in there that's part of the speech that I gave. And the bullet points was mindset and internal energy. And where we're going, the second one was what we're talking about today is performance and mastery, and how that is what I called my AAA insurance, awareness, acceptance, action. And it's the mastery point, not the performance point. Because when we're outcome orientated, we are not accepting, we're controlling, and we're ego based. But when we're in a mastery mindset and we're at that point of the teeter point between what is the awareness of the situation and then what can I accept. And I used a scenario, and I could have done a scenario too of when I broke my ankle.
Right.
And I'll use a scenario when I was stressing through a 100-mile run of chasing the clock. And I had the choice of being in fear and stressing or accepting where I was at. So when I was accepting, I was embracing the journey. I was in the present moment and just be with what was given me. And when we do that, we can shift our energy from that catabolic fear-based to that overall sense of peace. And it will create a level of happiness, because we are now in a mindset of growth as opposed to being fixed. When you're in a growth mindset, you're in that mastery mindset. When you're in a fixed mindset, you're in that performance mindset. You're outcome based. And so it's important to our overall well-being of being able to just look at where we are today and accept it. So as long as we don't get confused of, well, I don't accept the pandemic and we fight it. So look at your fear behind that. But I accept today, well, what's my opportunity? What can I do different in my life? And so I can connect with people on a deeper level, because now we have time to do that. You know, some families have their kids at home and they have time now to really embrace the relationship with their children, embrace the relationships with our loved ones, our spouses, our children, and care for other people. So taking that time to find your level of acceptance of where you're at in this trying time today.
Well,
Sorry, Ann, go ahead.
no, I was just going to point out when you said chasing the clock. Okay, chasing the clock is another good example. So if you're a runner and you're chasing the clock, then your focus, you want to get to that outcome, but what happens when you're chasing the clock? Is it speeding you up or slowing you down?
Well, let's clarify chasing the clock. So when you are in an event,
Yep.
in any event, there's going to be a time clock there that you have so much time to complete that event.
Right.
In an Ironman, you have so many hours. In a 100-mile run, you have so many hours. In a marathon, you have so many hours. Even in a 5K, 10K, whatever the events are. And so chasing the clock is I'm chasing that point of being close to the cutoff, being pulled from a race throughout the whole event. I'm not even halfway through the event. And so chasing the clock. And so when you're in that situation, and how important is that event to you, we can get into the idea that of fear of what do I have to do to make up on it. And so my focus was like on the watch. My focus was, who's around me? Who can I catch? Who's behind me? How fast am I running? How am I going to run faster? My focus was all out there, and how I'm not good enough, in a sense. I'm not fast enough. I can't do this. And freaking out over everything, to where if I just let go of all that, I can only do my best. From where I'm at today, I can only do my best. And when you embrace that, you can feel the energy from freaking out to just like, I'm just going to do my best. And you can feel that energy shift. And when you do that, you have more energy to move forward. You have a freeness about it.
Right.
And when you're in the dark mindset, it's going to be dragging you down. When you're in the open and the freeing of it, you have the freedom to move. You have the freedom to go.
And
Right,
your
because
outcome is always going to be, better as well.
Right.
right, exactly. Because like as a runner and I can relate to it more from skiing, but as a runner and listening to you all and knowing other people that are running greater distances, it is the clock. Looking at that, the focus is on that outcome, where when you flow, you're in that, you move more into that mastery. So I think it's a point. I think the clock's important. It's an important step. As a skier, I'll say that, you've got different levels. You start on the green, and then you go to the blues, and then you go to the blacks type of thing. But before you can get to the black, you do need to know what it takes to go from the green to go to the blue. So there are all these transfer places, which is the same as, in any athletic performance, when you're kind of moving into mastery mode and you want to do more and do better at it. But it's our attitude of how we're going to learn. And right. And taking the pieces and expanding on getting to that level of, now I know my rhythm of my run, because I've looked at the clock and that's holding me back in a way. So, but I had to get there in order to go next. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was coming to mind was our hike on the Inca Trail last year.
Mm-hmm.
And on day 2 was the hardest day. We were on the trail for 13 hours. But the last couple of hours, it started to rain. Downpour. So we had to accept that it was rain, and it was getting dark. So I had to wear a headlamp, had to have all our rain gear on, had to have our day packs covered. And we still had a while to go before we got to camp.
Wow.
So we had to be present. We had to accept what was going on around us, and we had to focus on the step in front of us, mm-hmm. so that we could get to camp, dry off, and have a wonderful dinner before crashing and waking up the next day and starting again. But that was a point of acceptance. Complaining about that, wanting a different outcome, wasn't going to help us get to camp. But being completely present in that moment was really the one thing we could do. It was because the trail was not very wide, and there was a cliff on one side of it. So it's dark, it's pouring, there's a cliff, and we're going downhill on rocks. Mm. So we had to be focused. We had to accept there was nowhere else to go, really. So and just focus on getting there.
Mm-hmm. So what would that look like if you weren't accepting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It would not death hanging out on the side of, right?
Thanks. Yeah.
Crying, complaining, fighting it, complaining about being wet, and just
wasting
God.
Yeah. A slower pace, right? That we got focused. We're like, we want to get to camp, we want to dry off, we want to have dinner. So we just have to go and focus. We didn't slip. We didn't do anything that you would, if you're not in that point, that you might, you may cause impact on wet rock. I mean, you think about that, right? Wet
for sure.
Going downhill with a cliff on the right. It's black. We're in the middle of the Andes Mountains, so it is pitch black. It's not. There's no lights besides our headlamp, right? So
it's not like the street lamp is waiting to come on because it's just now dusk.
You didn't put nice lamps along the side of the trail. There aren't any.
So you have no choice at this point. You could have either made your trek or not miserable. I mean, meaning you could have stopped and stayed where you were
in the trek, right?
Right. You could have continued in misery, or you could have opened up and created that more expansiveness in your mind to create the mindful approach to say, okay, this is going to take every second to be as present as possible in this moment. And that's it. That's all you can do, is show up in every moment. The next moment is a different moment. Not worrying about that moment. The next moment has different rocks in front of it, different corners, different, everything is going to be different in that moment. And I can't worry about that moment. I'm just right here, right now, on this rock with my headlamp, with the graces of this beautiful godlike rain, because that is what it is, right? And expanding your mind out to being willing to embrace it as a gift rather than seeing it as a limitation.
Well, I'm going to say that Nancy probably embraced it and saw it as a gift. And there's others that saw it as this limitation. And they're like, well, let's just get there. Let's go. Let's get it done. Right? Because you can still be propelled with a mindset of just pushing you forward.
Yeah. And I had to accept that I had an injury doing this. And so there were a lot of younger people in our group. So I did have to accept that I wasn't going to be the first one to camp. I wasn't ever going to be the first one to camp. I was going to be at the tail end somewhere, maybe not last, but in the back of the pack. But yeah, I'd say with the rain, there were a handful that just, as soon as it started pouring, it wasn't dark yet, they just ran for camp and got there as fast as they could. You know, and it kind of, we were in just different groups. There was a group behind us, my daughter and I were together, and then there was a group behind us, and there were a couple groups in front of us. But we all got there at different times. But we all got there.
Yeah.
And our mindsets could have been very different in that process of getting there. There were a couple that were just like, oh, we need to run, and they just started off running.
Interesting, though, it's almost that it's the exact same situation for everyone with the exception of their mindset.
Yep.
Yeah.
I oftentimes think about what would be different if you were, and I reveled upon this recently when I was trying to help somebody try to get out of their mind, getting out of their way. And I said, what would it be like right now if you were put in the middle of the Sahara Desert? What would be your thoughts? Would you have the same thought that you're struggling with right now? They're like, probably not.
Probably not.
And I'm like, okay, now pick yourself up and put yourself in the middle of like a Japanese major street in Tokyo. Like, would you have the same thought? And they're like, no, probably not. And so that alone is proof that our circumstance, all of those influencers play such a huge part in our mindsets, right? And we have choices, but we oftentimes just we're not willing to embrace the choice that leads us to that highest level of consciousness. Oftentimes because it feels better for us to stay in that place of, no, I kind of like being angry right now, or no, it feels better to be miserable right now, or no, I just, whatever we tell ourselves in that place of not being able to accept the fact that we are wherever that is at that moment. But the willingness to push through that sharp edge of the pain, on the other side of that is that opportunity for growth, the growth mindset, right? The fixed mindset's the one that keeps you limited, keeps you small, constricted. And it feels better sometimes for us, but I think it's because we're just not seeing, those are the blinders, right? So if we can take the blinders off, then we start to see what other opportunities there are, but you can't see them when your scope of reference is so limited. So yeah, and it's just the same kind of thing. You guys, your stories are very similar with regard to pushing through it. So curious, what was it that allowed you to trigger and shift your mindset? This is what I think all of our viewers would be curious. Well, what is it? How do you shift your mindset to one of more acceptance?
I'd have to say awareness. I was aware of the fact of what it was doing to my internal energy. And so we become aware of ourselves, become aware of the energy that's flowing through our bodies. And a lot of people they don't even realize that how much we are made up of energy and the energy we radiate out there. So I personally 100% aware of what the heck I was doing to myself. I knew that that negative energy was going to just deplete me, because I could hear it in my head, I could feel it in my body, and I could feel it dragging me down. And I know what negative, and that's exactly what negative energy will do. You know, to think about that, when we sit in that fear and that fear, it drags us down, and we respond to that. But I made the choice to change that, just accept, you know, I don't know what the clock is. Stop looking at the time. Just do your best. Just let go of the outcome, and just, because I personally, no matter how, you know, I wanted to finish it. You know, I did have that strong desire to finish, but I wasn't living in the fear to get there. I was going to miss the journey if I didn't just like be in the journey. I was going to miss the nature. I was going to miss what was around me. And so bringing that back to just being in the present moment, accepting that, and just then your energy shifts dramatically to just letting go of all that heaviness that hangs on our shoulders, that hangs on our backs, that drags my legs down.
So when,
I was just thinking about how there's like a fear and truth there that are, you know, again, it's, you know, how true is it that all those things that you're telling yourself that were putting you in a fear-based mindset, how true were any of them?
Oh, exactly. You know, then that's a great question that people can ask themselves when you get stuck into that gremlin thinking, that mindset thinking, that negative thinking. Is you can just step out of yourself and look at yourself going, well, okay, how true is that? Is that really real?
well, there are a couple things that came up, and if I think about that, one is to play off of understanding. We know that about these influencers, these other elements that Nancy brought up. All these elements of, well, and both of you brought up, they happen all the time, but elements like the weather and conditions and different things that happen, and we can talk about those in another time. But the other, just think about the words, okay? So the word acceptance, because words create our world, all right? It's really the definition, whose definition of acceptance? What is that definition, and how do we play that out? So sometimes people may consider acceptance, right, as acquiescing, okay? So it's not. But sometimes they go down that route of thinking, if I accept it, then I'm really not caring about it. But that's not what the definition of acceptance that we're trying to elevate here to what is being. You know, what it is it is, because we look at this as an opportunity to move forward in a different way and make different choices, but we accept what it is right now. But sometimes it can take them down that road of, okay, well, no, accepting is going to take away their motivation. And so we just want to be careful for those that kind of look at it in that term, in those terms.
Yeah, where as opposed to where acceptance is actually kind of releasing the chains of acquiescing, right? So it's releasing the energy of putting up with or tolerating or accepting a situation that we think we can't change, that we actually can, simply by changing our mindset as one part, right? That's not the only thing we can do, but that's simply by shifting our mindset to a more anabolic place. The weather is a fascinating one. You can just accept the weather as opposed to start oh, it's raining. You hear that all the time. I can't go out, it's raining. Right?
What are the lost opportunities there?
Right.
You can't play in the puddles.
Go play in the puddles. Go play in the rain. Go get muddy.
The rain is a gift.
My rain boots are over by the door. It was raining, and I'm like, I need to get out in the trees. I just put my rain boots on, my rain jacket out, and I went for a walk in the woods, and there was a huge puddle there.
So what would it look like if we shifted our mind to think that, because in our conditioned beliefs that the rain, we can't go out in the rain, that we accept that the rain is this amazing gift. Like, look at our own creation, and water. It's God's love. We are made of water. It's another form of something so much more brilliantly beautiful. And oh my God, the mind can go crazy in expansiveness in terms of thinking. Look at how we've been conditioned to believe such horror stories about being in the rain. Like, what's going to happen when we go get wet outside? Really? Like, okay, like, let go. How can we let go of that so that we can embrace the beauty of it?
So a lot of that is something for us to be aware of. That's how we were brought up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we were taught when we were children, and so we accepted that idea that
How
really
about you're gonna catch cold, stay inside,
right.
It's raining.
So now it's like, how fun is that to go run in the rain?
Yeah.
Just changing that mindset.
Yeah,
I love
So
that.
the other thing I thought, kind of what you were saying, Anne, is that it's our internal energy we're talking about here.
mm-hmm.
It's not about them. It's not about the people out there, because we can't change them. But sometimes a lot of our thought process is how can I fix them, and how am I responsible for their behaviors? And that's not what we're talking here. What we are talking here is we are responsible for our own internal behavior. It's our internal energy that is the most important. And once we shift our energy to be more anabolic, to be more accepting, become more aware, is our world outside will change to that anabolic world as well.
Without having to change anyone else.
Right.
Yep.
It's amazing, amazing journey.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It is amazing. It is an amazing journey. That is true. And just, being accepting this of us, then once we can be accepting and let go, we can be accepting of other people. I say that all the time to my young adults. I say to them that your character and the things that you do, they are all on you today. You are young adults. When you were younger and I was raising you, then then I could take more responsibility. But that responsibility now has been shifted, and it goes to you now. So, it's something that we just have to learn how to let go, see things in others. Like I can see some things in my young adults, and I'm like, okay, I don't think that that's really the way that you were brought up, or that where you're going here, and you get to this. If this is your belief now, then this is part of how you want to shine. And just know that it's not part of me now, but giving them the responsibility. I think that's a fine line too, is being able to have that acceptance to actually allow your young adults and your children to become independent and grow. It's really hard. It's hard to let go, right? It is hard. We have expectations, and we don't want it to be that we're giving up, but we also need them to be able to launch in however that launch is. So it covers all kinds of bases.
Interesting there too, because you were touching on a word, acceptance, that we have not really referenced in a different connotation, and that is belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we feel that we are accepted, and how do we feel that we belong? So it's a completely different connotation of this word acceptance. And there's obviously some relationship there, because we want to be accepted for who we are. Same kind of thing, that we want to accept the mindsets and a highest level of consciousness. But just interesting there with just the fact that there's a connotation of this word, that when you first hear the word acceptance, wherever your mind might be, whatever the connotation, there's a varying degrees of what this word might mean.
So how does that look, Karen, when you what I'm hearing a little bit with this acceptance and belonging, I sort of think about your authenticity in some ways, like finding that of sorts.
Well,
Even
it goes
though,
back to the same thing, accepting a situation or being accepting of yourself, right? So the authenticity of the situation and the truth of the situation and how we accept it
Mhm.
or not, right? So this is kind of what we've been talking about, accepting situations and circumstances and being able to let go of the things that we can't control or the things that aren't true and the things that bring fear. And, you know, again, it goes back to accept what is true, trust what is true.
Mhm.
And so the same thing of yourself, like the feeling of acceptance, you want someone to love you unconditionally. That's that whole place of the same thing with no judgment of any situation, no judgment of the fact that you're out in the rain, no
Mhm.
judgment that you're running with, you know, looking at the clock, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
Mhm.
where that comes in too, though, because that's challenging. You want others to accept you, but you cannot control how others respond to you. That's out of your realm of control. You can accept yourself,
Right.
but you cannot control how somebody else perceives you and whether they're going to accept you or not.
Right.
Right.
But sometimes when we're really accepting ourselves and we're really aware of ourselves, we draw that into us as well. Because
Yeah.
we're able to step into, and this is your strength, Karen, is step into our values.
Mhm.
And then we can make that choice if that relationship is going to continue or not. And either way, it's okay.
Yeah, it's almost the same thing we were talking about. If you had that mindset around a situation where the rain happens to represent something beautiful, then you don't ever see it again as it's not. So if you have your own self-acceptance, then you don't ever view yourself as not being accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, and that kind of,
Well said.
right. And that's what brings us back to all of this. We're talking about these disciplines
Mm-hmm.
because they're a way of building this long-term philosophy of how we can live our life at a higher resonating level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're covering.
Mm-hmm.
So,
This has been fun, as always.
Right.
right. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. And we have
Thank
more
you,
to
ladies.
come.
Yeah.
And-
Conscious choice is next.
Yes. So if there's any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you
We would
guys.
love to hear from you because as we want to share with you, we want to grow ourselves as well. The better we are, the better you are.
Yep. So any tips, anything you want to hear from us, let us know. Just put it in the comments below.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, ladies, for your participation today.
Fun.
you.
Thank you.